Hey church, we're going to be doing a teaching from 2 Samuel chapter 13 today. Just a little warning when we actually read this story, it's not really, it may be the type of story you might want kids to be out of the room for. Even though it's in the Bible, it's very full on, it's very dark. But I want to deal with it today, taking a break from the book of Matthew, and just giving that little disclaimer out there that it's quite a heavy story. It's one of those stories that if you knew nothing about Christianity or even Judaism, and you picked up this story as your first introduction to the Bible, and you're reading it and you're like it would just disturb you, right? Like, it's like, what is this about? I mean, there's no redeeming quality here. It says it's just a dark story. What am I meant to get out of this? It is one of those stories where understanding a bit of context in the wider frame of what's going on in the book of Samuel, and in turn the Bible, really helps us begin to grasp it and understand it. So this horrible tale we're about to read comes in a part of the book after King David has sinned awfully, like he's had an awful moral failure. So David is the king of Israel who's after God's own heart. He was a wonderful man of faith who retreated into the presence of God often, wrote many psalms, and we see that character shine through in the fruit of his life when he beats Goliath and he shows trust in God, and when he, even Saul, the king before him, who has many character flaws, tries to kill him. He shows grace to Saul, even when he has the opportunity to take vengeance and kill Saul. So he has Saul at his mercy, and he doesn't kill him. So we see David is a man of character. So there's a section of Samuel where it's all about David's rise. This man after God's own heart, he rises, but then at the top of the arc of that rise, there is this awful moral failure, and it's absolutely awful what he does. He sleeps with another man's wife, and he has that man, to help cover it up, killed, and then marries the widow. It's really, really disgusting sin, and David is confronted through a prophet called Nathan. And he actually repents. He is deeply broken and remorseful by what he's done. But even though he can have God's forgiveness, he won't be spared the consequences of the sin that he's committed. So he sought God's forgiveness, and God was able to forgive, as he always is when we turn to him in humility. That's consistent, but there are consequences to that sin. And so this is a section of the book of Samuel where it's kind of the down arc. So David's moral failing, and kind of like the spiral effect of that that needs to occur, and kind of like the ongoing effects of sin in his family. So it's in the middle of that portrait of sin coming into his David committing an awful sin, and that sin running through into his family as well. So that's kind of the portrait we get here. And so that's why what we read is awfully sinful. There's not much redeeming about it. And so that can help us kind of place it where it's meant to go. So we're not just going, what on earth is this? But always important to remember that part of the wider story of Scripture is that God faithfully keeps his promises and works through the brokenness of humanity. Even though humans can be so awful and so stuffed up, God faithfully pursues them, faithfully keeps his promises. And that's partially why we read such messed up stuff in the Old Testament, because it is a story about God's grace. Even humans who quite clearly don't deserve it, God is still there, keeping his promises and graciously forgiving those that turn to him. And so, that's just a couple of framing comments before we read this intense story we're about to read from 2 Samuel chapter 13. So 2 Samuel chapter 13, you can read along on the screen, or you can have it open in front of you. In the course of time, so this is 2 Samuel chapter 13. In the course of time, Amnon, son of David, fell in love with Tamar, the beautiful sister of Absalom, son of David. Amnon became so obsessed with his sister Tamar that he made himself ill. She was a virgin, and it seemed impossible for him to do anything to her. Here is a girl that Amnon is obsessing over, and to the point of being physically ill. And it's just he can't have what he wants. Now, in verse 3, now Amnon had an advisor named Jonadab, son of Shimeah, David's brother. Jonadab was a very shrewd man. He asked Amnon, "Why do you, the king's son, look so haggard morning after morning? Won't you tell me?" Amnon said to him, "I'm in love with Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister." "Well, go to bed and pretend to be ill," Jonadab said. "When your father comes to see you, say to him, 'I would like my sister Tamar to come and give me something to eat. Let her prepare the food in my sight so I may watch her and then eat it from her hand.'" So Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. When the king came to see him, Amnon said to him, I would like my sister Tamar to come and make some special bread in my sight so I may eat from her hand." So David sent word to Tamar at the palace, "We'll go to the house of your brother Amnon and prepare some food for him." So Tamar went to the house of her brother Amnon, who was lying down. She took some dough, kneaded it, made the bread in his sight, and baked it. Then she took the pan and served him the bread, but he refused to eat. "Send everyone out of here," Amnon said. So everyone left him. Then Amnon said to Tamar, "Bring the food here into my bedroom so I may eat from your hand." And Tamar took the bread she had prepared and brought it to her brother Amnon in his bedroom. So Amnon, here's something Amnon is obsessing over, this person. And and this obsession is now he's alone with that, and he can take what he wants. Human desire, unchecked by God, can twist and turn us into something quite animal-like. He's just purely possessed by desire at this point. Here's something he wants, and to grab it will cause such pain. It'll be a violation of the other person in the room, Tamar, and it would also be incredibly damaging to his character and himself. And it's just but he's a man possessed. He's made such an idol, such an obsession about something in God's creation, a person in this case, that he's just become a creature of desire. It's something quite ugly. Now I'm going to read on, but I think you can quite clearly see where this is going. Verse 11. But when she took it to him to eat, he grabbed her and said, "Come to bed with me, my sister." "No, my brother," she said to him, "don't force me. Such a thing should not be done in Israel. Don't do this wicked thing. What about me? Where could I get rid of my disgrace? And what about you? You would be like one of the wicked fools in Israel. Please speak to the king. He will not keep me from being married to you." But he refused to listen to her, and since he was stronger than she, he raped her. The next verse for me is just, so he takes what he wants, he rapes her. The next verse is just, I want to say the word interesting, but it's almost like not serious enough a word, but it's just so interesting what it says next. Verse 15. Then Amnon hated her with intense hatred. In fact, he hated her more than he had loved her. And Amnon said to her, "Get up and get out." Now, the chaos and destruction that comes from Amnon grabbing at this and defying clearly God's intentions for sex and relationships and honoring the dignity of another human being. The consequences, they go on. I mean, he ends up being his brother Absalom. Organizes his murder later on in the book. So it just obviously creates more and more destruction. But I want to focus here on that verse. So where it says, he hated her more than he had loved her, almost in an instant. Like he took and grabbed at what he was obsessing over, and that space, that obsession, that void that was left after he had taken what he wanted, was suddenly some illusion broke, and it was filled with a negative emotions, hatred for her, and almost like a loathing, like something's happened, like he's grabbed at what he wanted, and yet here he is, not happy, hating her, and he's in this kind of morose state. Like it's really interesting, and this story is a great commentary on idolatry. It's a great commentary on idolatry, because it comes down to this. So, and this is just where we're going to couch this sermon now. So if you're wondering where this is all going, here it is. It's like, so Matthew chapter 6 verse 33 says this: "But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." So there is creation and there is a creator, right? So God is the creator of his creation, and he knows all the right boundaries and blessings and the best way to interact with his creation. He created, and that includes everything: human relationships, nature, beauty, drugs, family, like resources. Like it's all in his creation, right? And he, as the creator, knows his creation and knows us as his special creation and knows what's best. And of course that verse makes sense, that if we seek the creator first, then all these things will be added unto us, right? Like everything will find its place. We can be blessed and provided for, but we start with the creator. We don't start with his creation. But idolatry, in essence, is when you take something at the bottom. So take something in God's creation and you look to that to be God itself. Like you look to it to give you ultimate meaning and ultimate fulfillment. And when we do that, those things can turn and twist into things that actually won't bless us, but will actually curse us, will actually hurt us, will actually destroy us. A bait and switch happens. If you grab at something in God's creation with all your heart, you'll almost have the opposite. Everything is good in its right place as we follow God, but obsess over one of these things over and above God, and a bad thing happens. Something twists. So in this case, in the case of Amnon, he grabbed for sex, but in a way that was obsessive and really paid no attention to God. It was just looking to sex and sex itself to satisfy him, and he grabbed at it. And something that's meant to bring connection and enjoyment in the context of commitment actually left him feeling disconnected, full of hatred, with no love for what he committed the act with, and in fact in the way he did it was completely outside God's design. But you can even, to help us sort of grasp what I'm meaning here, so even God, beauty is something in God's creation. He put it in there. But if you obsess about beauty, if you're someone who's listening to this and you obsess about beauty, you end up feeling really ugly. Does that make sense? So if you grab at beauty to be your everything and find life and meaning in being beautiful, and it, to the point where it's like almost above God, then you grab at it, but you end up with something quite the opposite. You feel ugly, right? The same thing he said, money, right? If you reach at money with all your heart and you grab at it, you'll just always feel poor. You'll probably feel like the poorest person in the room, no matter how much money you have, because that's how idolatry works. Because they can't actually fulfill you with the meaning and satisfaction God can. They can't. They're things in his creation, not God himself. And none of these things that I just mentioned are wrong in themselves. How can beauty be wrong? How can sex be wrong? Money can't be wrong in and of itself. It's but to grab at that with your whole heart and in place of God and be looking to that for your ultimate meaning and satisfaction instead of God. Well, that's when it twists. That's when it twists. These are all poor substitutes to God himself. When we obsess about things and we grab at them, we'll end up with something that's pretty much the opposite. The same can be said for entertainment. If you don't have boundaries around your entertainment and you consume copious amounts of it, because that's where you're looking for your ultimate escape and to find ultimate meaning in all this entertainment you're engaging in. So think about this. You grab at entertainment with all your heart, but you end up feeling more bored than ever. It's like it can't do it. It doesn't work. Not in any long-term sense, not that ultimate satisfaction that comes from being in relationship with God and in his people. Nothing. We can't grab anything with and have it fulfill that need. It's not about labeling things as wrong. It's about living with things in the right order. It's about God first. It's about following Jesus, who knows us and knows what's best for us. John 10:10 says this: "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy, but I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." John 10 is making a comparison between, it's most likely making a comparison between Jesus and the Pharisees. So, he's saying, I as a shepherd, if you follow me, you have life and have it to the full. But to follow the Pharisees, and the ones he's talking about are the ones who keep denying him, then they don't have the same your same interests. Actually, if you follow them, they'll steal from you, they'll kill you and destroy you. I'm the good shepherd, right? And I like using this verse also to play into this almost as an indirect application, because I think the same could be said for our idols, right? So if we look to Jesus first as our shepherd, he knows us and knows what's best, and he can guide us through how to walk through all these things in his creation. But if we look, the moment we grab something in that creation and put it up top, it's something that can actually steal from us rather than bless us, kill us and destroy us. It's like they're poor replacements for the shepherd himself, aren't they? Jesus is the good shepherd. The God who created us knows us. Come on. This absolutely connects to what we preached about last week. Last week, for those who were at the outdoor service, and that sermon will be up on YouTube. It is up on YouTube. That service is up on YouTube. But I talked about how everyone has a rhythm of retreat and engage. Like, that's how our life works. We engage with things that we put in sort of our responsibility realm, or the things that demand from us. And then we exit those spaces into spaces in our mindset that we frame as retreat spaces. We all do that. We all engage and retreat. The only difference is what we retreat into, right? And what we engage with. So some people, it's retreating into video games. Sometimes it's more sinister things like gambling, pornography, or the bottle. But it can be gardening, it can be sport. Lucas Melendez suggested sport is absolutely a retreat. It's one of my retreats. So we all retreat and we all engage. But the difference is what we retreat into. But if we only retreat into these things, but we don't retreat into God himself, like David did, hours upon hours with his harp, just singing songs to God, praying to God, thinking about what God thinks about him, and thinking about God's love for him and God's faithfulness, because he retreated into God himself. He was retreating into the space that actually strength, hope, and peace comes from. And if we're retreating into other stuff in our life but not retreating into God, those things could actually well be idols, because we're behaving like that's where we'll find true strength, that's where we'll try and find true rest, that's where we'll find true peace. That's actually, and if it's at the expense of resting in God, it's probably something that's quite close to or in danger of being an idol in our lives, right? So I guess how do we as people keep ourselves with living as if It's creator first, then creation. How do we do it? How do we live from a space that engages with our world like that? And I'm gonna say exactly what I said last week when I was talking about the challenge to retreat into God, and that the world of habits is so important. Intellectual assent, yes, we should live from the space where creator comes first, is great, but we need to pursue that value in our lives in habits, right? Like in actually form habits that keep us in that space. Having habits, individual and community disciplines. The focus right now will be individual disciplines that keep pointing us to that reality and keep us centered with it. Whether it's habits of reading the Bible and praying or journaling, or spending time with God's people. Making a habit of these things is what ultimately forms us, because theology and psychology agree that we are the accumulation of our habits. What we do regularly always does something to us, and what we do on a regular basis shapes our loves and our longings. So everything that we love and we long for is continually being shaped by what we continually do. So the answer to the question, if we're fair income about wanting to live from that space, we need to fight for habits in our lives that push us towards that identity, if we want the blessing of living from there. So, that's why I'm going to talk about a Sabbath month in January coming up, where we're going to pull things back. The hubs won't be running. There'll be something very simple available for people to engage with on a Sunday. But the whole point of pulling everything back and stopping everything is to make a clear statement to God that we understand that it's not dependent on us, that actually we don't know the way, He knows the way. He knows what's best for our life. He is our creator. It's not our hard work that provides on its own, but it's actually He is our provider. And He's our Redeemer as well. We are people saved by His grace, and He's the one who sanctifies and leads us. That's why we stop. Because if we don't stop, we behave like it all depends on us sometimes, and we lose our way running around in God's creation, but we're not stopping to pay due attention to the Creator Himself. And so in that month where we strip everything back, I would like to encourage each of you to pick up one habit, try one new habit that will invest in your relationship with God, an individual discipline. And we're going to have a whole list of things you can pick and try. You can pick more than one, but pick one at least, and try and do it every day for the month, right? So we've created room in our church rhythms. Here's a month where you can focus on trying to build a habit that will invest in your relationship with God. And side by side with that, we would like you to pick something in your life that is a go-to retreat for you, or something that you particularly have a habitual thing of turning to, maybe a bit much, and actually pick something to limit or cut out for the month. So if you're a binge watcher of TV shows, put some limits on that or cut it out for the month as you try and recalibrate your habits. And the hope and prayer of that month is that as you do that, that God would lead you to the end of that month, one where it's easy to continue that habit that you've started for a whole month through the rest of the year, but also that your heart would have recalibrated closer to a heart that genuinely lives from the space where we understand God is the one who created our world and created us and knows us. And so we're not going to be so foolish as to put anything in His world above Him.